It is a visible reality of the modern economy. The wealthy consistently accumulate more capital, while the lower tier of the population sees its purchasing power stall or decline. Most societal critiques attribute this divide to external corruption, pointing toward greedy oligarchs, rigged tax codes, or the specific failures of the political class. However, this concentration follows a recurring mathematical pattern that appears in almost every system involving exchange, regardless of the laws on the books. Shifting an economy to a centralized communist system rarely eliminates this inequality. It typically only changes who occupies the top of the curve. In these cases, wealth moves from the hands of entrepreneurs and investors into the hands of the politically connected and the state bureaucracy. Biological traits follow a normal distribution, often called a bell curve. If you map human weight, the vast majority of people cluster around the average, with only a few outliers on the extreme ends. But the moment a system involves exchange, the rules shift toward a Pareto distribution. This power curve shows a small number of participants holding the vast majority of the value, while the rest of the population shares a much smaller fraction. This pattern is a consistent feature of the world around us. In music, 10% of artists receive 90% of all listening time. In geography, 10% of cities hold 90% of the population. Even in deep space, 90% of stars are concentrated within just 10% of galaxies. Because wealth follows this specific curve, the goal for an individual is not to wait for a political solution to flatten the graph, but to understand the variables that allow a person to move toward the peak. The first variable is a defensive strategy against the expansion of the money supply, which acts as a constant drain on the value of cash. Since the Federal Reserve's creation allowed for the unending expansion of the dollar supply, the US currency has lost 97% of its purchasing power. Those who hold their wealth in dollars see their value bleed away. To counter this, the wealthy trade their cash for hard assets, like real estate and stocks, that rise in price as the currency is devalued. Most of that price appreciation isn't real growth, it is simply a shield. If a house or a stock price doubles while the currency loses half its value, the owner has only managed to stay even with inflation. Real wealth is generated after that shield is in place, specifically through the dividends and cash flow these assets produce while protecting the investment. The second variable treats personal expertise as a permanent asset, one that cannot be seized or devalued by a changing market. Acquiring even a single basic skill, like understanding the specific needs of a hiring manager, can move someone from chronic unemployment to a reliable $7.25 an hour baseline. Stacking a second specialized skill on top of that baseline creates an exponential increase in value. Pairing an effective interview style with high-level sales techniques allows an individual to command an income far higher than either skill could generate alone. These stacked skills provide a safety net. Even if a wealthy person loses every dollar, their ability to navigate the market and close deals ensures they never start from absolute zero. The third variable uses capital to bypass the limits of physical labor. Human effort is capped by time, but capital can scale to any size. Consider an options trader with $8,800 selling a covered call on 100 shares of Coca-Cola. That single transaction might generate $150 in income. Applying the exact same strategy and number of clicks to 100 shares of Apple requires $34,000 in capital. However, that identical effort now yields $640. The wealthy focus on these scalable strategies, allowing their income to grow based on the size of their portfolio, rather than the number of hours they spend at a desk. The final variable is the most powerful, the nonlinear growth that occurs when assets are allowed to compound over decades. The math favors the early actor. Investing $5,000 annually for 10 years starting at 25 beats starting at 35 and investing for 30 years. Compounding is front-loaded. Reaching your first $100,000 means you are chronologically 25% of the way to $1 million. Warren Buffett illustrates this scale. He made his first million around age 30, but he didn't reach $1 billion until his mid-50s. The vast majority of his $100 billion net worth was generated in the decades after most people retire. Time is the force that takes basic skills and scalable capital transforming them into the kind of runaway growth seen at the top of the curve. When you combine these 4 variables, the path to the peak becomes clear. Stack skills to maximize income, trade that income for assets to neutralize inflation, scale your capital to detach from labor, and let time do the heavy lifting. Growth at this level is a function of these specific variables. When the conditions are met, the resulting concentration of wealth follows the same Pareto distribution we observe across all systems of exchange. Eventually, the accumulation reaches a point of self-sustaining momentum. The capital itself begins to earn more in a single year than the owner could have ever earned through a lifetime of active work. Changing your financial reality doesn't require a new political system. It requires an understanding of the mathematical rules of the game and the discipline to start pushing your own snowball.